Mother's love died the day my son looked me in the eye and said I wasn't part of his life anymore. I didn't argue and I didn't beg. I just smiled and told him, "Don't worry, Ethan. Life has its own way of teaching lessons." Years later, when his children wouldn't even speak to him, he finally understood what I meant. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it all began. My name is Linda Carter, and for more than 30 years, my whole world revolved around one person, my son, Ethan. I had him young, barely 22, married to a man I thought I'd spend forever with. But forever ended when my husband, Mark, died in a car accident on his way home from work. Ethan was only 2. I still remember the smell of the hospital hallway when they told me. It felt like my heart had been scooped out of my chest. After that, it was just me and Ethan. No family nearby. No savings. Just long nights, sore hands, and hope. I worked as a hotel cleaner during the day and a cashier at night. I used to fall asleep sitting up, but whenever Ethan would crawl onto my lap with his tiny hands and say, "Don't worry, Mommy. I'll take care of you when I grow up," it gave me strength I didn't know I had. And for years, he was everything a mother could dream of. Bright, gentle, respectful. I'd save every extra penny for his school supplies and later for his college fund. He was the top of his class, always saying he wanted to make Mom proud. When he got a full scholarship to a top university, I cried like it was the best day of my life. In a way, it was. I packed his bags, kissed his forehead, and told him, "Go make the world see what I already know you are." He promised he would. The first few years, he'd call every night. He'd tell me about his classes, his new friends, the food, the weather. Sometimes he'd even send me pictures of his dorm or short videos when he cooked something for the first time. He'd always end his messages with, "Love you, Mom." But when he started dating Madison, those calls came less and less. I still remember the first time I met her. She was beautiful, polished, confident, and every bit her wealthy parents' daughter. She gave me a polite smile, called me Mrs. Carter, and kept her phone in her hand the entire dinner. Ethan was smitten. You could see it in how he looked at her. She talked about art galleries and summer homes. I talked about the weather and the new washing machine I'd bought secondhand. She didn't even pretend to be interested. When they left that night, I told myself, "She'll warm up to you. Give it time." But time did the opposite. It turned my son into someone I barely recognized. After graduation, Ethan landed a job at a major tech firm in Chicago. I was so proud I nearly burst. But when I called to celebrate, he said, "Thanks, Mom, but I'm a little busy. I'll call you this weekend." That weekend came and went. So did the next one. Months passed before he called again, and when he did, Madison's voice echoed in the background. He said they were engaged. I congratulated him, of course. I told him his father would have been proud. But when I asked when we could meet to plan the wedding, his tone shifted. "Mom, Madison's family is handling most of it. They're kinda particular about things. But don't worry, you'll have a seat, of course." A seat. That word stayed with me. Not a role. Not a place of honor. Just a seat. The wedding was beautiful, though. Madison's parents spared no expense, white roses, chandeliers, a live orchestra. But as I sat near the back, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was a guest at someone else's life. When I stood to give Ethan a hug afterward, Madison's mother stepped in first. She smiled at me, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, and said, "You must be so proud. You raised a fine young man." I wanted to believe her. But the way she looked at me, at my worn dress, my tired hands, I knew she was really saying, "You did your part. Now let us take it from here." After the wedding, Ethan called less and less. At first, he'd text every few days, "Busy week, Mom. I'll call soon." Then it became once a month. Then once every few months. I'd send him messages on holidays, birthdays, random Wednesdays. Sometimes he'd reply with a thumbs up emoji. Sometimes, not at all. One Thanksgiving, I decided to surprise them. I baked his favorite pie, packed it carefully, and took the early bus to Chicago. When I arrived at their apartment, I knocked, excited like a schoolgirl. I heard voices inside, laughter, music, the clink of glasses. Then the door opened. Madison stood there in a silk dress, holding a wine glass. Her smile froze the moment she saw me. "Oh," she said flatly. "Linda. We didn't know you were coming." Behind her, I saw her parents at the table. Ethan looked up, startled, but didn't move. I swallowed hard. I just thought I'd bring dessert. Ethan always loved pumpkin pie. Madison's mother gave a polite little laugh. "How thoughtful. But we already have plenty. Maybe another time?" For a long second, no one said anything. Ethan looked torn, glancing between us like a boy caught between two worlds. Then Madison gently closed the door halfway. "Sorry, it's just family dinner tonight," she said softly. I stood there for a moment, pie trembling in my hands, and nodded. "I understand," I whispered. "Have a nice night." As I walked back down that hallway, I swore I could still hear their laughter after the door shut. That was the night something inside me broke. The calls stopped after that. I still sent messages on holidays, birthdays, anniversaries. Never got a response. Eventually, I stopped trying. Years went by. Ethan and Madison moved to a bigger house. He got promoted. He was earning more than I ever dreamed of, over $100,000 a month, according to an article I found online about his company. I printed it out and tucked it in my Bible, right next to the prayer card from his father's funeral. People in town would ask, "How's your boy doing?" And I'd smile and say, "He's doing great." I never told them he hadn't called in 3 years. Then one night, out of nowhere, my phone rang. It was Ethan. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. My hand shook as I answered. "Ethan?" "Hey, Mom," he said, voice quiet. "Listen, I know it's been a while, but Madison's pregnant." For a second, I couldn't speak. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful," I said, tears filling my eyes. "I can't believe I'm going to be a grandmother." "Yeah," he said awkwardly. "Listen, we'll keep you updated. Madison's a little stressed, so we're keeping things private for now." "Of course," I said. "Just promise me I'll get to meet the baby." He hesitated. "We'll see, Mom. Things are just complicated." The line went quiet after that. I never did meet my grandkids in person. I only saw pictures, ones Madison's family posted on social media. They never mentioned me. Not once. Years passed like that. I grew older, lonelier. I'd sit on my porch at night, staring at the stars, wondering if Ethan ever thought about the woman who used to sing him to sleep after double shifts. Then, one day, I got a letter. It wasn't from Ethan, it was from a lawyer. He wanted my signature for a minor property transfer Ethan had arranged years ago. Apparently, he wanted my name removed from a small plot of landmark and I had owned, a piece I'd been saving for Ethan since before he was born. When I called to ask him why, his tone was cold. "Mom, it's just business," he said. "The company needs it for expansion. You wouldn't understand." "Business?" I whispered. "That land was your father's." "Yeah, well, it's mine now. You should just sign it. Don't make this difficult." For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I replied, "All right, Ethan. If that's what you need." He hung up without saying goodbye. That night, I sat by the window and thought about everything I'd sacrificed, every meal skipped, every ache ignored, every prayer whispered for his success. And for the first time in my life, I didn't cry. I just felt done. I didn't curse him. I didn't wish him harm. I just said, quietly, "God, let him learn. However you see fit, let him learn. Because the cruelest kind of revenge isn't loud. It's the kind that life delivers on its own, slowly, painfully, until the one who hurt you feels it where it matters most. People always say that money changes people. But the truth is, money doesn't change you, it just shows who you were all along. And my son wasn't cruel at heart. He was just weak. Too proud to admit when he was wrong, too eager to prove to the world that he didn't come from a woman who used to scrub floors to make rent. After I signed that last paper, I didn't hear from him for a long time. Months turned into a year. Then another. Every now and then I'd look him up online. There he was, smiling in expensive suits, standing in front of glass buildings with words like visionary leader written under his picture. Madison stood beside him in every photo, perfect as ever, designer dresses, diamond earrings, two beautiful children at her side. A boy and a girl. My grandchildren. I used to zoom in on their faces, memorizing their smiles. I wondered if Ethan ever told them about me. Something in my heart already knew the answer. One afternoon, a letter came, not from Ethan, but from a charity organization. It said a donation had been made in my name by the Carter Family Foundation. I stared at that letter for a long time. He hadn't called. He hadn't visited. But he used my name like a prop. A convenient story for the press, successful son of a hard-working single mother. He'd turned me into a headline, but never once into a phone call. Still, I didn't hate him. I just felt tired. So I stopped following his life online. I stopped hoping for calls that never came. I made peace with the silence and started tending my garden again, the one his father planted before he died. It became my therapy. My prayers grew there, in the soil, one seed at a time. But fate has a strange way of circling back. It started with a knock on my door one rainy evening. When I opened it, a young woman stood there, shivering under a soaked umbrella. "Are you Mrs. Carter?" she asked. "Yes," I said carefully. "I work for Mr. Carter, your son. I was sent to bring you this." She handed me an envelope and hurried away before I could ask a single question. Inside was a typed letter. No greeting, no warmth. Just words that cut in their simplicity. "Mom, Madison and I are going through some things. She took the kids and left. I'll handle it. Don't contact her. Don't get involved. Ethan." No love, no how are you, not even I'm sorry. I read that letter 3 times before folding it neatly and placing it beside my Bible. I whispered, "You're already learning, son." Weeks later, gossip started spreading online, articles about Ethan's company being under investigation for financial mismanagement. Headlines like Tech CEO faces internal audit scandal and Carter Foundation under scrutiny. I didn't need to read them. I could already imagine the stress carved into his face. The long nights. The cold stares from the woman who had married him for his status, not his soul. Sometimes, poetic justice doesn't knock. It slides in quietly, wearing the face of consequence. A few months later, I got another letter. This one was different, handwritten, messy, almost desperate. "Mom, I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because you're the only one who ever truly cared. Madison left for good. She took the kids to California. She said she's tired of living with a man who works more than he breathes. I don't know how to fix this. Everything feels empty. I wish I could come home, but I don't even know what home is anymore. Ethan." I read it under the kitchen light, and tears slipped down my cheeks before I realized it. Not because I pitied him, but because he was finally feeling the pain I'd once felt, the pain of being left behind by someone you loved more than life itself. That night, I sat on my porch, looking at the moon. I whispered, "You took my love for granted, Ethan. Now you'll see what it's like when love looks away." And life didn't stop there. It kept teaching him. Madison remarried within a year, some investor she'd met through mutual friends. She posted pictures online of their new mansion, her new husband, her perfect life. The children grew older, and in every photo, Ethan's name was nowhere to be found. He tried to reach them, of course. Sent gifts. Wrote emails. Flew out to see them. But kids can sense who's real and who's just showing up too late. They didn't answer his calls. Didn't open his letters. Eventually, Madison blocked his number completely. Ethan's success started to crumble soon after. His company partners backed out, the press turned against him, and investors ran. By the time he realized how fragile everything was, it was gone. All of it. I didn't hear from him again for almost 2 years. Until one evening, I got another unexpected visitor. This time, it was him. I heard a knock and opened the door, and there he was, standing in the same spot he'd stood when he was 18, leaving for college with a suitcase and hope in his eyes. Only now he looked older. Weary. His expensive coat hung loose around his shoulders. His eyes were bloodshot. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at the man in front of me, my son, the one I'd loved enough to lose myself for. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The house smelled of soup and rain. He looked around, eyes landing on the same worn couch, the faded photos on the wall. "You didn't change anything," he said softly. "Didn't need to," I replied. "This house remembers what love looks like." He sat down, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. "I lost everything," he whispered. "My family, my job, my kids, they don't even talk to me anymore. They think I'm selfish. That I only care about money." I didn't respond. I just let the silence sit between us like a mirror. After a while, he looked up, tears spilling over. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I treated you like you were nothing. I thought success meant forgetting where I came from. I thought distance meant independence. But all it did was make me alone." I took a deep breath. My hands trembled a little, but my voice didn't. "You wanted the world, Ethan," I said softly. "And you got it. But the world doesn't love you back. Only people do. Only mothers do." He nodded, crying quietly. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "No," I said gently. "You don't. But I'll give it anyway. Because I stopped being angry a long time ago. I just let life do the teaching for me." He stayed the night in the guest room, the same one he used as a kid when he was sick, when I'd sit by his bed and hum until he fell asleep. In the morning, I found him sitting on the porch, staring at the sunrise. "I'm going to start over," he said. "A new job, maybe teach, volunteer, something real. Something that means something." I smiled faintly. "That's good, son. Maybe it's time you finally learn what living feels like." He looked at me, his eyes red but softer. "Do you think they'll ever forgive me?" "Maybe," I said quietly. "But even if they don't, you'll learn to forgive yourself. And that's the start of everything." He nodded, and for the first time in many years, I saw a glimpse of the boy I used to know, the one who once promised he'd take care of me. When he left later that week, I didn't stop him. I didn't ask where he was going. Because his punishment wasn't mine to give anymore. Life had already given it. A son who turned from love learned what it felt like to be turned away. A man who once had everything learned the value of nothing. And me, I didn't need revenge anymore. I had peace. Because the sweetest revenge isn't payback. It's watching the one who hurt you finally understand what you tried to teach them all along. That love, once thrown away, doesn't always come back. But peace does. People think punishment always comes loud, in shouting, slamming doors, or angry words. But the worst punishment is silence. Not the kind that freezes you out, but the kind that forces you to sit alone with the echo of everything you said and did wrong. That's what my son lived with for years. And that's what finally changed him. When Ethan left my house that morning, the sun was just rising over the old maple trees in my yard. I watched from the porch as he walked down the same path he used to run through as a boy, back when his laughter filled the air like birdsong. He turned once, gave me a faint nod, and got into his car. The road swallowed him whole, the same way the world once did. 4 months afterward, I didn't hear from him. No calls. No letters. No updates. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel the sting of that silence. It wasn't rejection anymore, it was reflection. He needed space to face himself. So I let the quiet do its work. That winter was long and gray. Snow fell heavier than usual, blanketing the small town in silence. I spent my days knitting scarves for the church drive and tending to the old house that creaked like a tired friend. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking of him, wondering if he was eating, if he'd found work, if he was sleeping at all. Then I'd stop and remind myself, he has to find his own peace, the way I did. And somewhere out there, he was trying. According to what I later heard from a neighbor's niece, who worked at a downtown cafe, Ethan had taken a small apartment in the city. A far cry from the glass towers and penthouses he once knew. He taught part-time at a community college, lecturing on business ethics, of all things. That irony made me smile. The man who once cut corners to climb ladders was now teaching young minds about integrity. Life really had a sense of humor. He lived modestly, ate simple food, and spent his evenings reading instead of schmoozing. Gone were the tailored suits and imported watches. He wore jeans now, drove an old car, and looked, in the few photos that surfaced, like someone finally learning how to breathe again. It seemed he was beginning to understand that success isn't measured in what you own, but in what still remains when you lose everything. One Sunday afternoon, I was sweeping my porch when a letter slipped through the mail slot. No return address, but I knew that handwriting. It was shaky, uneven, nothing like his old confident scrawl. Dear Mom. I hope you're well. I'm writing because I don't know how else to talk to you. I've tried calling a dozen times, but I can't seem to find the right words. I'm still working on myself. I know I hurt you deeply. I know I can never undo that. But I want you to know I think about you every day. I've been volunteering at a youth center on weekends. The kids there remind me of, well, me. The version of me you raised before I thought I was too good for where I came from. There's one boy, 12 years old, whose mom works double shifts. He told me he wants to buy her a house one day. I almost broke down right there, Mom. Because that used to be me. And I finally understand now, the kind of love that sacrifices everything, and the kind of blindness that takes it for granted. If you can find it in your heart to see me again, I'd be grateful. If not, I'll understand. Love, Ethan. I held that letter to my chest for a long time. Not because I didn't want to forgive him, I already had, but because sometimes forgiveness needs to settle quietly before you hand it over. I didn't reply right away. I let time stretch, the same way he once did. It wasn't revenge, it was rhythm. The rhythm of life balancing itself out. A few months passed before he came again. I was watering the garden when I saw his car pull up, not the sleek black sedan he once drove, but an old silver one with a dented door and faded paint. He got out slowly, holding a small brown paper bag. He looked older, calmer, almost gentle. Hi, Mom, he said softly. I brought you something. He handed me the bag. Inside was a loaf of bread, still warm, and a small jar of honey. I've been learning to bake, he said, smiling nervously. It helps me think. I couldn't help but laugh. Baking, huh? Your father would have liked that. We sat on the porch, sharing slices of bread and honey like old times. The air smelled like spring and forgiveness. He told me about his job, the students he taught, the small apartment he called home. He told me how he'd started writing, nothing fancy, just reflections on choices, consequences, gratitude. And then, in a voice quieter than a whisper, he said, I wrote one about you. I turned to him, startled. It's called The Hands That Built Me, he said. I read it to my class last week. They clapped. Tears welled in my eyes. I didn't need to hear the words, I already knew what they meant. From then on, he visited once a month. He'd mow the lawn, fix things around the house, help with groceries. He even repaired the old radio his father used to love. Sometimes we didn't talk much. We didn't have to. The silence between us had changed. It wasn't cold anymore. It was warm. Peaceful. Full of unspoken understanding. One evening, as the sky turned orange over the garden, Ethan said something that stayed with me. "You know, Mom," he said, "I used to think you were weak for forgiving people. For never fighting back, even when life was unfair. But now I see, forgiveness isn't weakness. It's power. You let time fight your battles for you." I smiled. I didn't let time fight, son. I just stopped fighting myself. That summer, Ethan asked if I'd like to meet his children. I hesitated. The wound had closed, but the scar still ached. "They don't know about me, do they?" I asked. He looked ashamed. "Not the way they should. Madison told them things, that you were gone, that you didn't want to be part of their lives. I'm trying to fix it. But it's slow." "Then don't rush it," I said gently. "Let them come when they're ready. The truth always finds its way home." And it did, though not right away. A year later, a small card arrived in the mail. It had glitter stickers on it and a child's handwriting. "Dear Grandma, Daddy says you make the best pumpkin pie. I like pie. Love, Emma." I laughed through tears. My granddaughter's first letter. It was short, clumsy, and perfect. Ethan told me later he'd been showing his kids old pictures, ones I'd mailed him when he was young. Pictures of birthdays, camping trips, me holding him on his first day of school. He said Emma looked at one and whispered, "She looks kind." That night, I baked 2 pies. One for me, one for them. I froze the second one, just in case they ever came to visit. The next spring, they did. I'll never forget that day. Ethan's car pulled into the driveway, and 2 little faces peeked from the back seat. Emma and Lucas. My heart nearly stopped. When they stepped out, shy and uncertain, I knelt down and opened my arms. "Hi," I said softly. "I'm your grandma." They hesitated for a moment, then ran into my arms. The smell of their hair, the feel of their small hands, it was like breathing after years underwater. Inside, we baked cookies, told stories, and laughed until the sun went down. Ethan sat quietly at the table, watching us with tears in his eyes. When the kids went to bed, he said, "You see, Mom? Life came full circle." I nodded. "It always does, if you let it." That night, after they left, I sat alone in the kitchen with the clock ticking softly. I thought about the years of pain, the distance, the tears I've cried into my pillow. And I realized something. Revenge isn't always about getting even. Sometimes it's about watching the world bend back into balance, slowly, naturally, without you lifting a finger. Ethan's downfall wasn't my doing. Neither was his redemption. But both had roots in the same soil, the lessons I'd planted long ago. A mother's love had hurt him. A mother's silence had healed him. And that, I realized, was the truest kind of revenge. Not to destroy. But to let the one who hurt you become better, because of the pain they caused. That's when the world truly pays attention. Redemption doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly, like dawn light slipping through old curtains after a long night. That's how it began for Ethan. Not in one grand act, but in hundreds of small ones. Little choices that, on their own, didn't seem like much, but together, they started stitching his broken life back into something whole. The months after his children met me were kinder than any years that came before. Ethan called often now, not out of guilt, but out of genuine care. Sometimes he'd say, "I'm just driving home and thought of you, Mom." And sometimes, we didn't talk at all, we'd just listen to each other breathe on the phone, content in the quiet. He'd send me photos of the kids' drawings pinned to his fridge, or a sunset he caught after class. He'd write, "You were right, Mom. The small things really are the big things." For a man who once measured life in salary and square footage, that was redemption in its purest form. Ethan's work at the college grew into something bigger. At first, he only filled in for an absent professor. But the students liked him, because he didn't lecture them like a man above them. He spoke like someone who had fallen, scraped his knees, and learned why it hurt. They listened. They trusted him. Soon he was offered a full-time position teaching business and human ethics. He told me on a Sunday call, his voice shaking the way it used to when he was a boy trying to tell me good news. I didn't even apply for it, Mom. They just asked me. I smiled through the phone. That's what happens when you finally live like the person you were meant to be. He laughed softly. You always make it sound simple. It is simple, I said. It's just not easy. He moved into a small brick house not far from the school. Nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a porch, and a patch of yard big enough for his kids to chase fireflies when they visited. He planted tomatoes and marigolds. He said the marigolds reminded him of his dad's garden. When he sent me a picture of the first bloom, I couldn't help but cry. Not because of the flowers themselves, but because I could finally see the peace that had taken root in him. The first time the children came to stay a full weekend, I was nervous. Would they see him differently now? Would they forgive him the way I had? Friday afternoon, they spilled out of the car, laughing, carrying backpacks and art supplies. Ethan looked tired but happy, and for once, not like a man haunted by what he'd lost. They spent the weekend making pancakes, building a birdhouse, and watching movies piled under one blanket. Saturday evening, I joined them for dinner. Ethan cooked. Real food, not takeout, not some reheated meal. He stood there, flipping chicken in a skillet, humming a tune his father used to sing. When he caught me watching, he smiled. You used to make it look so easy. It wasn't, I said. You just never saw the hard parts. He nodded, eyes soft. I see them now. That night, when the kids had gone to bed, we sat on his porch with 2 mugs of coffee. The crickets sang, the sky stretched wide, and a quiet peace settled between us. Do you ever think Madison regrets it? He asked. I looked out at the yard before answering. Maybe. Or maybe she thinks she's happy. But her happiness isn't your lesson anymore. He nodded slowly. I don't want revenge anymore. I just hope she finds what I couldn't give her. That's when you know you've healed, Ethan. When you can wish peace on the person who broke you. He was silent for a while, then said, You did that with me. Yes, I said, smiling. And look where it led you. Time has a way of softening sharp edges. It doesn't erase pain, it just folds it into the fabric of who you are until it stops cutting when you touch it. Years passed. The seasons turned, the garden bloomed and slept again, and Ethan became steady in ways I never thought I'd see. He no longer chased success. He built it, quietly, brick by brick, from kindness and honesty this time. He called every Sunday. Not because he felt he had to, but because he wanted to. Morning, Mom, he'd say, voice light. Coffee or tea today? Tea, I'd answer, pretending we were sitting at the same table, even though a few towns separated us. Sometimes the kids would grab the phone. Grandma, Dad burned the pancakes again. Then you better teach him right, I'd laugh. Their laughter came easy now, like wind through open windows. The cracks in our family had healed, not with noise, but with gentle daily moments, calls, visits, shared dinners, birthday candles blown out together. It was ordinary, and it was perfect. Ethan's students often wrote him letters. He showed me some once. One said, You make me want to be the kind of person who calls my mom back. Another read, I used to think business was about numbers. Now I think it's about people. He'd tuck those letters in a shoebox on his bookshelf. They keep me honest, he said. He never knew that he kept me honest too. Honest about faith, patience, and the strange, slow power of forgiveness. When Emma turned 13, she spent part of her summer with me. She helped water the garden, fed the stray cat that came by every morning, and asked me questions about her dad. Was he always this calm? She asked one day, her fingers trailing through the mint leaves. I smiled. No. Once, he was all fire and pride. Thought love made you weak. Thought money made you safe. She wrinkled her nose. That sounds weird. It does, I agreed. But we all believe strange things until life teaches us better. She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, he tells us he hurt you. I nodded. He did. But he also fixed it. That's what matters. Why did you forgive him? I looked at her, that same stubborn spark in her eyes that her father used to have. Because if I didn't, he might never have learned to forgive himself. And everyone deserves one chance to try again. Emma thought for a moment, then whispered, even me? Especially you, I said, brushing her hair behind her ear. One day, you'll understand that forgiveness isn't something you give. It's something you live. That summer, Ethan and I began a quiet tradition. Every August, on the anniversary of Mark's death, we'd meet at the small lake outside town, the same one where Ethan used to fish with his father as a boy. We'd sit on the dock in silence, the water smooth as glass, and drop wildflowers into it. Ethan never said much during those visits. Once, though, as the sun dipped low and turned the water gold, he whispered, I finally get it now. What Dad meant by take care of your mother. It wasn't just about money. No, I said softly. It was about honor. And presence. He nodded, eyes glistening. I wish I'd understood sooner. You did, I said. You just had to lose everything to see it clearly. He gave a small, sad smile. Guess that's our family way of learning. Maybe, I said, but at least we do learn. As the years went by, Ethan's work at the college became a calling. He started a scholarship for single parents trying to go back to school. He called it the Carter Promise. The first recipient was a young woman who worked nights cleaning offices, just like I once did. When he told me about her, his voice cracked. She said she's doing it for her little boy, Mom. Said she wants him to have more than she did. I closed my eyes and felt something deep in my chest, an ache, yes, but a warm one. It felt like life had written a full circle and signed it with grace. One autumn morning, Ethan came by early. The air smelled like rain and leaves. He held 2 mugs of coffee and said, Come on, Mom. I want to show you something. We drove through the back roads until we reached the new community center his students and colleagues had built together. On the front lawn stood a small bronze plaque. It read, In honor of Linda Carter, whose quiet strength built generations stronger than steel. I stared at it, words tangled in my throat. Ethan stood beside me, eyes full of tears. You taught me everything that matters, he said. I just needed time to remember. I reached for his hand. You didn't just remember, Ethan. You rebuilt it. We stood there for a long time, just breathing. No speeches. No audience. Just mother and son, and the quiet hum of forgiveness turned into legacy. That night, after he drove home, I sat on my porch with a blanket around my shoulders. The stars were bright, the air still. I thought about all the years that had led us here, every broken promise, every sleepless night, every prayer whispered into the dark. And I realized this was my revenge. Not the kind that burns. The kind that blossoms. Because nothing punishes a selfish heart more than realizing too late what selflessness looks like. And nothing redeems it more than being shown mercy anyway. Ethan's pain had been the world's lesson. My peace had been his compass back. And now, every time he smiled at his children, every time he helped a student, every time he said thank you instead of I deserve, the universe whispered the same thing back to me. You did right by him. You did right by yourself. There comes a point in life when you stop waiting for things to get better and realize they already did. That's what the last stretch of my years felt like, quiet mornings, coffee on the porch, the garden humming with bees. Peace had finally taken root deep inside me, so steady that even silence felt full. Ethan was in his late 50s now. The lines around his eyes had grown kind. He still taught at the college, still baked bread on Sundays, still called to tell me about the students who reminded him of his younger self. Sometimes he'd say, "I caught myself rushing again, Mom. But then I heard your voice in my head, slow down. Nothing real grows fast." And I'd laugh. "You're finally listening, then." His children were grown too. Emma studied environmental science. Lucas worked with a small nonprofit that built homes for families who had none. Both of them carried that same gentleness their father learned the hard way. Every holiday, they'd pile into the house with food and noise and love. The walls that once held only echoes of loss now rang with laughter. That was my real revenge, watching joy reclaim the spaces where pain used to live. One spring afternoon, Ethan showed up unannounced, a little gray in his hair, a soft tiredness behind his smile. "Come take a drive with me," he said. We followed the old county road until we reached the lake. He parked near the dock, the same one where he'd scattered wildflowers for his father every year. The air smelled of pine and rain. He helped me out of the car slowly, my knees weren't what they used to be, and we walked down to the water. "Remember when you used to bring me here to fish?" he asked. "I remember you falling in," I teased. He laughed. "You pulled me out and made me hot chocolate. Said if I wanted to swim with the fish, I'd better learn to breathe underwater." We both smiled at the memory. Then his voice softened. "Mom, when I was younger, I thought you forgave me too easily. Now I know it was the hardest thing you ever did." I looked out at the lake. "It wasn't hard once I stopped wishing you'd be different. I just loved you as you were and let life handle the rest." He nodded, eyes shining. "You were right. Life taught me everything I refused to learn from you." He took something from his pocket, a small wooden box. Inside was a silver bracelet engraved with a single word, Grace. "It's not much," he said. "But I wanted you to have it. You gave me grace when I didn't deserve it. I wanted to carry that word forever, so I'd never forget." I touched the bracelet, my fingers trembling. "It's perfect." He fastened it gently around my wrist. The metal was cool against my skin, but it warmed quickly, like forgiveness itself. The next few years slipped by softly. Ethan's lectures turned into community talks, then into a small book. He dedicated it to me. For my mother, who taught me that silence can teach louder than words. When he gave me the first copy, I held it close like a newborn. All those years of struggle, condensed into pages of wisdom that might help someone else avoid our mistakes. That was legacy enough for me. Then came the day I felt my body slowing down. Not in a frightening way, just a gentle knowing that it was time to rest. Ethan came to stay for a while. He cooked, cleaned, and sat with me in the evenings while the news played too softly to hear. "Do you remember the fight we had before you left for good all those years ago?" I asked one night. He nodded. "Every word. I used to think I'd never get over it. But looking at you now, I wouldn't change a thing. If pain was the price for this peace, I'd pay it again." He took my hand, tears slipping down his face. "Thank you for never giving up on me." I smiled. "You made it easy, eventually." When my time finally came, it was quiet, just me, the sound of the garden outside, and the bracelet still cool on my wrist. Ethan sat by my bed, reading softly from the book he wrote. Every few lines, his voice would tremble, but he never stopped. And when I finally learned what love meant, he read, I realized it wasn't a feeling. It was a promise kept, even when the other person forgets. Those were the last words I heard before sleep took me. Ethan buried me beside his father, under a maple tree near the lake. Every year, he visits with his children and grandkids. They bring wildflowers, bread, and honey, the same gifts he once offered me when he came back broken. They sit by the water, tell stories, laugh, cry a little, and always end with the same line. "She taught us that love doesn't need revenge. It becomes revenge when it refuses to die." And somewhere, if souls can smile, I do. Because that was the real ending all along, not loss, not punishment, but renewal. A son who betrayed his mother, rebuilt by her mercy. A family that learned forgiveness can echo louder than anger. That is the quiet circle of life's revenge, to live long enough to watch the pain you endured become the wisdom someone else lives by. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.